Hello, everyone, and welcome to Storied Arcs, Episode 6, for our conclusion of Paper Girls, issues 26 through 30, otherwise known as Trade Paperback number 6, or the back half of Deluxe Edition Volume 3. I am your host, Mike.
And I'm your host, Alex.
We have to dive straight into this. Issue 5, or Trade 5, I know that we went a little longer than usual because it deserved it, and holy smokes, if that one deserved it, this one absolutely deserves that level of hype.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
So, I think we're going to do a character-by-character breakdown. But first, should we save it for the end to talk about what we were just talking about before we got on mic was how difficult it is to stick the landing on a story? You want to start there, or you want to start in the story itself?
We should probably let's save that to the end. I do. The one thing I do want to note about the ending is I don't remember if I brought it up last episode or not, over something we talked on air. But the idea of when this was being released, single issue, when we knew the end was coming for this story. Now, obviously, if you're reading now and in collected form, you see it's a finite number of trades or deluxe editions, whatever it is, so you know that this is the final arc. But I went back and looked, and as far as I can tell, the first indication that the story was coming to an end was for the solicitation for issue 26, which is obviously the first issue of this arc. It says in that one that this is the beginning of the final story arc to be concluded in issue 30. So, these issues were released March 2019 to July 2019. So the solicitation for this would have been in December 2018, a few weeks after the Trade 5 would have been released. So you would have read through issue 25, you would have gotten the fifth trade, and then when the solicitation for the new issue came out, you would have seen that, okay, this is the last arc, this is the last issue. So going into it, even as it was coming out single issue, you were really primed now. Oh, okay, we're coming to the end game here. And as we talked about, it really felt that way in arcs 4 and 5 in those volumes, because they really started tying things together back to the beginning. So it really did feel, even if you didn't know,
I think any savvy reader should have been able to suss that out.
If you've either not just read comics, but you follow storytelling, when you start seeing all these callbacks to the beginning, all these kind of mirrored images, mirrored moments, tying up loose ends, it really did feel like the end. But going into this issue 26, the beginning, that was a definitive proof that this actually was the beginning of the end. So, knowing that going in, especially reading in a collected edition, your mindset's a lot different. If you know this is the end, this is how it's going to wrap up, you have I think a level of expectation, right? Of knowing what the story has been for the past 25 issues. You're diving into the last 5 here. You have an expectation of maybe not what to expect, but I think maybe what to kind of what to feel as it wraps up.
Yes, it's all well said. And I really can't add to that other than to rehash it. So I say we press on.
Yes, let's do it.
Now, this is one where we do open again with the dream sequence.
Yeah.
And I take the dream sequences, which we do learn finally what he explains what dreams are. We get there a little later. I had totally forgotten that. So we'll just hit that when we get there.
Yeah.
But we open with Aaron, as we did with the series. So you want to open with Aaron's story arc and just kind of go through all of her events in these 5 issues?
Yeah, I think so, or at least the first 3.
Well, yeah,
so
where they're all
separated
in
this arc. Yeah, they're separated, and issues 26 and 27. Kind of each girl, each storyline, each timeline, they get like 4 to 6 pages per issue, and issue 28 is structurally is I think magnificent in terms of it's 4 panels per page, 1 per girl, 1 per storyline, 1 per timeline, all the way through. But they're all separated, and then it's not until issue 29 when everyone starts get back together. But yeah, so Aaron opens up. It's unclear when we left her. But we find out that it's Halloween time. She's back in Stony Stream. We don't know exactly what year it is, but there are some clues there. We see a Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, which that ended in 2013. There's an 11, which I think is a very funny meta reference because Stranger Things debuted a year after Paper Girls did. And obviously the first arc is 1988. 80s, yeah. So that debuted in 2016. And there was also a Pennywise there. And maybe that's reference to the reboot, which was in 2017. So, I mean, it's possible that we're in 2019, the time at which you'd be reading this, or 2018 maybe. But yeah, before that, again, you mentioned another dream for Aaron. And
extremely on the nose this time. Like all subtlety is lost. With the tree and the apple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you go back, it mimics exactly the first 2 pages of the very first issue in terms of the imagery, in terms of the panel layout, everything about it. Aaron's posture, she's kneeling down and holding, in the first arc, it's an apple. Here it's a McDonald's apple pie. Kind of everything about it mimics the exact layout of the beginning of the series. So right off the bat, the first 2 pages, we're calling back all the way to the beginning.
Yeah, and I don't want to get hung up on this or read anything into it. There's probably a reason, but I'm not sure how interesting it would be. This time we have an anthropomorphic tree that is speaking to them, but that could just be the natural progression of they have a completely digital tree as the librarian talking to them in the future.
It could be.
And since we now know this is a message constructed from the future sent back in the form of a dream, could be beckoning to that or just riffing off of it. In some way, I don't think it's anything particularly meaningful. The meaningful thing is that it's a tree and it's an apple.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the fact that at this point we've moved the imagery along, and that it's again a tree. The tree of knowledge and all of that we've seen before. I think that's what it is. And also, so they had the visual of the tree that has both apples and apple pies hanging from it. Which really would be something.
Yeah.
There's a comment about how the apple pies changed from
especially
being fried
if they were
to
the
baked.
good apple pies.
Yeah, the old school pies from McDonald's. If you're old enough to remember those, that Aaron's sister Missy in the dream makes reference to that. Yeah, that they're back when they were fried, and soon they're going to be baked, and they're not going to be as good. And I can wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, honestly, I've never had one before or after. But I know that there was a change and people were upset. I just always went for the soft serve ice cream there.
Well, you know what? McDonald's changed a lot of things to be healthy, which again is kind of funny because we're still talking about McDonald's, no shots, but it is fast food. But they made a lot of steps to be all of a sudden like less bad for you.
That's what it is.
That was
it's
one
not
of the things.
Healthy. It's less bad for you.
Less bad. Yeah. So
they're mitigating the damage that they had been doing. But okay, so we get the dream sequence, and then we get she wakes up in the 2016 with the Trump mask, or 17,
or
sometime after 2016.
Yes, sometime in and around our current time frame.
And they are able to identify her by pulling out her ANDG card, and her last name has changed. Did you see that?
I don't think I noticed.
It's scratched out, and
no. Her first name has changed.
Her first name was.
So her first name was Aaron, as in AARON. Because obviously the person.
I was trying to read it, and I was like, "What does it say under there?" I was like, Aaron. I see.
Yeah. So
I don't know why anyone would have written the first name in the middle right there, but.
Well, maybe you're trying to center it maybe on the card. I don't know.
Either way, yes, but that's to point out the gender bias, right? They heard verbally that there was a new paper boy named Aaron, so they wrote AARON. Yeah. She shows up.
It even comes
Aaron.
back again.
Yep. Okay. Bam.
If we jump back to the end real quick, when at one point, Tiffany says that met the new girl Aaron, and obviously it's a you can't hear it, but when you see it spelled out, Mac responds Aaron like a dude, AARON. She's like, no, it's Erin. But yeah, so so they get that, and that kind of freaks Erin out a little bit. But in her dream, she has a vision of Michael Jackson, who is in a full Smooth Criminal outfit. Appears that Michael Jackson maybe has like Tiffany's face. We see a one shot of that. It's definitely not Michael Jackson's face, and we get a little more on that later. But the message that Vision Michael Jackson says is that in order to get home, she has to moonwalk.
Yes.
Which Erin interprets as, well, I got to retrace my steps.
Yes.
I got to go back to where it all started. So
which is pretty brilliant.
She makes her way.
I mean, I have to admit.
It is pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah, the idea of walking backwards, as it were. So yeah, she goes to the house, which I guess was an abandoned house in 88, right? The one that had the ship in it, because that's where she goes to, the time travel ship. I guess it was abandoned in 88, and it's still abandoned now. But yeah, she goes back down into the basement.
Extremely tough look for Cleveland.
It really is. It really is. But maybe not all that surprising. He says, knowing he lives in Cincinnati. She goes back down to the basement, and then there's a kind of a light of some sort, and then she gets transported into some place, but that place is where grandfather is, and the cathedral. And we do get a few pages of that to see that they being grandfather and the cathedral, all them, they have actually been shifted out of time and space. They're like in the fourth dimension. They're not in any specific timeline.
Which really freaks the grandfather out.
It does. Yeah.
This is news.
Yeah. So this we kind of see as we kind of learn, this is where this place out of time and space in the fourth dimension is where the editrix has come from. The floating square and triangle things that we've seen our characters interact with. This is kind of their realm, I guess. But yeah, so this is where Erin shows up, and then he kind of becomes grandfather's hostage, I guess. He's not. I think he would really
resent that label.
He probably would. Erin probably sees it that way.
Oh, Erin absolutely sees it that way. It's immediately antithetical. Ruins this guy's life by telling him the truth about himself. Which he doesn't believe, though. He doesn't. He dismisses that out of hand. It's not until later when he comes to that realization. That's true. I think the fact that she was willing to swing at him like that is still very telling about Erin.
Yeah. Well, but okay. So part of that. Okay, then it's interesting. So you read that as she was trying to like harm Japo in a way, like try to bring him down a peg or something.
Yeah, I think she was trying to gain an upper hand because she was like, how is it I know more than you? Either that or she was totally freaked out that she knows more than him.
Well, okay, because in the moment I read that as, because when what Japo says was that when these figures, the editrixes, appeared, that's when they discovered time travel. And Erin shoots back like, no, it wasn't discovered. It was invented by a woman. That woman was your mother. And part of me felt
woman
that
who raised
she did
you,
that
but yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you. But part of me thought I read that as she simply wanted to like defend Dr. Bronstein's honor. Like forget about it, so it was less about trying to hurt him.
I see that.
But it's interesting that I read it more of like she was disgusted that Dr. Bronstein had been erased, that all this time he thinks that time travel was something that was discovered, that was brought upon them, as opposed to something that someone discovered and invented.
Or perhaps she thinks that he knows the truth and would rather suppress a woman's achievements.
It could be that she doesn't know what Japo does or doesn't know. Maybe she's unclear as to how much he actually knows about his own history, because this is not the same version of the one that they may have met previously, or she doesn't know that. She doesn't know what version this is, to be perfectly honest. So, but as they're talking, they're having this discussion, there is a giant tear goes through time and space, which is what's described as a 4D fault line, which opens a giant hole, a rift, into our prehistoric time at 11,000 something BCE. the same time we saw back in volume 3. And then as that happens, one of the Editrexes attacks them and attacks the character named Cardinal, which I guess is the title of Cardinal. And at which point Joppo shoots the Editrix, and then that causes some sort of kind of explosion or it ignites something. And that's the end of, that's where we leave Aaron at the end of in issue 28.
Yes. And I think that's perfect for Aaron. Shall we move on? And if so,
yeah.
KJ, Tiff, or Mac, you choose.
Let's go KJ here. She's the next one we actually see in issue 26.
That's the order I wrote it down in. I had it as Aaron, KJ, Tiff, Mac, right?
I have Mac, Tiff.
Okay.
Let's go KJ, then Mac, then Tiff. Okay, so KJ, as we saw at the end of volume 5, she's back in the 50s. We find out 1958, which I think was pretty close to what you said. You looked up the headline, right? The headline they showed in the paper of of Iraq becoming a sovereign state.
Yes, and that was pretty accurate. Yeah. It's also the same interval as Back to the Future, which I appreciate that symmetry. It's 85 to 55. You go 88 to 58.
Oh, sure. Yeah. 30 years. Yeah. 30 years. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I guess I didn't put together. It'd be 30 years. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It's that was the appropriate amount of time to travel backwards in the 80s. It's canon.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That's how far you go back and how far they went forward as well.
Exactly.
But yeah, so KJ finds herself outside the Cleveland Preserver printing office there. And she kind of very quickly deduces where she feels she needs to go, which is she needs to find the author of the Frankie Tamada comic strip, which we learned about in volume 4.
Yes.
Yeah, so she goes and she sees a teenage Charlotte. Did we decide on a pronunciation? Spachevsky?
Oh boy, no.
I don't know, but we see a teenage Charlotte, Chuck, as she goes by in the year 2000 in volume 4, and she's hiding Jude in her basement.
Right.
Jude, one of our teenagers from the future. KJ confronts Jude
with
and
a pithy
basically
Beatles reference.
With a very. That's one of those references that as soon as you found out the kid's name was Jude, you're like, at some point they're going to drop a lyric. And it was one of those things I was waiting for because you just can't not do it. It's almost impossible.
Even though the guy's never going to get the reference, it's just for the audience of whoever said it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But so KJ confronts him and basically gets him to help her to go along by saying, "Hey, I met your friends Heck and Naldo back in 1988, or not. Well, for her back in 1988, in the future for them in 1988. And that's he is a little he understands because he's a time traveler, but he also asked the obvious question of like, well, if you met my friends, well, why didn't you meet me?
Right.
Yeah.
I respect Jude, not wanting any punches pulled, and you learn he's already terminally ill.
Yeah, exactly. He has 4DC, the same thing that the same time traveler disease, cancer, whatever that Mac has. So
he's not shocked by his own death.
Yeah,
he's just like, you might as well tell me, since I know and you're walking on eggshells now with me.
He's more bummed of when he dies. Like he's like, oh, I die in this crappy century or whatever, something like that. He's more bummed about that than the actual idea of it. Because much like we hear from Heck and Naldo, your end is your end. And so Jude is clearly of that same mindset. And he does take some comfort because KJ does tell him that the old timer that kills him, does get shot, which we do see. That was the old timer Alistair. We saw him in both volume 5 and volume 1. So Jude does know that he does get avenged in some way.
Yeah. And we don't get much of Jude. Also, I was trying to think. I was like, for a second, I thought he had a romantic moment with I was going to call her the old woman. She's a young woman in this.
With Charlotte.
She gives her a kiss. But we know that it wasn't romantic for him, but she seemed to talk about him with like a longingness when we meet the old version of her.
I think so.
So maybe he led her along to get what he wanted out of her.
Or she simply read it that way. There's a longing in the panel, I think, when they kind of say goodbye and he's like, I'll be back because we need your help to save the future or whatever. There is a longing in her face. That's clear that she maybe had at that moment has hopes for something more. But we know, and Jude knows that isn't something that's going to happen. But maybe in that moment for that version of Charlotte, that's something that, she aspires to.
Yeah.
But
well, and maybe that's how you get her to play ball. And these kids are kind of an ends justify the means crowd.
It definitely so.
Rob the past to, give a Band-Aid to the future.
They
do whatever.
They make reference to being Robin Hoods, and they see that as being a noble thing. So yeah, they clearly have no qualms about, kind of meddling in time affairs, doing whatever it takes, taking the things, finding things, scavenging things. So yeah, if it comes to using someone a little bit, they clearly don't see above. They don't seem above doing that.
And no judgment, just. The grandfather certainly is willing to do things for his ends. And I think that gets to what I was saying last time is that I don't think we, the reader, are being assigned a side in that war. I don't think BKV intends for
Not
us
at this
to
point.
feel a certain way, one way or the
Not
other.
at this point, no. I think we talked about early on, because of how the characters are introduced and the perspective they're given, you automatically side with the teenagers, with the young people. And the old people, the old timers are viewed as the villains. I think that's meant to be your perspective in that first arc. And then as we go along, as we start seeing, kind of reveal more about the sides and the war itself, I think it's definitely meant to be ambiguous. It's definitely meant to be, like you may not be on one side or the other, or you may not be on either side. I think you're meant to see both sides as being, both flawed and in some ways correct. I think it's meant to be ambiguous at this point, definitely.
Well, and frankly, that's where I ended, because I had remembered not siding with the teenagers. I didn't remember about where I was with the grandfather in the grand scheme of things, but I remembered like these teenagers from the future, the old timers' descendants, are not necessarily correct in what they're trying to do here. And I believe the book ends by conceding that point but both of them are wrong. Both say we have to abolish time travel, which means really we both lose. It's not a win-win, it's a lose-lose.
Yeah, well, exactly. When we come down to it later and we found out that the war has ended, when we get to Tiffany's story, she interprets that as that means you guys won. When actually it isn't. It's simply that there was a truce called.
Right.
Well, yeah, and there is, and that it comes to the idea that, listen, if you guys agree to stop, we'll stop. And that's saying either admitting that both of us are wrong or both of us are right. In the end, it doesn't actually make a difference. But yeah, no, I think we see, getting to spend time with Jude, because obviously we didn't really see him. He's dead when we start the story. He's already dead in volume 1. We see him a little bit in volume 5.
We'll clean that up later.
There's a bit of a flashback there. No, leave it in there.
Yeah, look, if we don't say if everything we say in the podcast is correct, no one will have any reason to discuss in the group. So we're just giving you fodder for nerd rage.
I'm pretty sure it was in volume 4 when we saw some flashback. We saw a little bit of that flashback of when they go back to 1988. But yeah, I think the more you see of them, it's not that you like them less. They're not like unlikable characters, but the more you see the way they view the world and the war that they're part of, and the struggle that they're part of, and the less sympathetic, I guess, you are to their case. Right. I think that's intentional, because I agree. You get to the point where you realize maybe these kids are just kind of dumb kids. Like maybe they are just teenagers, and they're looking at the world in a very teenage point of view, which is, that's kind of code for a very short term, very limited worldview. They're not looking at the long view. It's about how can I get things better right now?
Right. And I think the book correctly paints that, let's take it out of the context of the book and just say, if I were to tell you that young people are sometimes overly optimistic and reckless and careless in their pursuit of good intentions, I think you'd basically have to agree with that. And if I say
yes, that
old people sometimes get too conservative and are unwilling to risk something that's broken, bad, or mediocre because they trust in what they have and aren't willing to gamble anything at all, that's probably true too. So all he did was just stretch those a little further apart and then place them somewhere else on opposite ends of the timeline, and bam, you've got a compelling conflict 100%. That's grounded in real experience.
Yes, what you described is the generation gap that exists between literally every generation. Your children who are up against the adults, and then when the children become adults and replaced by their children, before you realize it, you become the thing that you used to hate and despise. And we actually get a little bit of that when we get to Tiffany's story, but we're not quite at Tiffany's story yet.
Right.
I guess we should probably go to Mac.
Yeah, we are wrapped with KJ. Yeah, we covered everything there.
Yeah. So one thing was to finish up with KJ, she does. So they get to some cave where Jude's ship is, and then kind of as it happens, as things are timed up, which is when grandfather shoots that editrix, and there's like some kind of explosion or whatnot. She sees a window kind of into Tiffany. And we see Tiffany kind of recoiling, which is the vision that Tiffany saw back in Volume 3, which we thought, and I thought at the time, was actually the Tiffany at the beginning of Volume 4, because it's kind of in the snow and all that. It was January of 2000. But here we see the exact shot, which actually does make sense, because if it's KJ's vision of what's happening, she'd have to be able to see it. And Tiffany, when she lands in the year 2000, kind of by herself, KJ's not around to see that. So how could she have a memory of that? So here we get that moment, and even Tiffany mentions of it. She's like, no, wait, I've seen this before, because that image of Tiffany is the exact one she saw when she had visions of the future. But yeah, so at that point, that's where Tiffany's story wraps for now. So on to Mac.
Yes, on to Mac. And Mac is in the weird dystopian future where we left her. Turns out it is actually about 38 minutes or so before the end of the world, with big twist that I completely forgot about. Quanta Bronstein no longer introduces herself as Dr. Bronstein.
Yes,
she's past titles. Yeah. She's back to being just a person, humbled by time and experience.
I think part of that too is when Wari last issue talked about how when they jumped back ahead, they actually went past the time at which her colleagues may have been looking for her, which they refer to as like the late 21st century. So maybe by dropping Doctor and just being
she can disappear.
Quanta Bronstein, help disappear a little more. But yeah, she's there. We find out that she is also dying of 4DC. She says she's patient zero, which kind of makes sense. She's the first time traveler. So if this is a time traveler disease, it's the same disease that Mac has. And that, at the end of her life, she decides to jump ahead to the end of all life to see the end of everything. And that's where Mac happens to end. Which gives her
like a weird, a weird aesthetic appreciation for the universe. Remember the last time she was confronted with death, she had unrenounced God. And this time when she's confronting death, she starts to come to grips with some notion of God.
Some notion of God, higher being, whatever it is. But you see that, again, comes with, when you think about the experiences that someone like her would have had traveling through time and then resettling in a different time, and then everything that's come to pass with both Wari and Japo as she saw them kind of grow and become whatever they were before she left. But yeah, you get different perspectives on life and on the world. And we get a really interesting analogy from Bronstein about what time is using the cassette tape,
which
from Max Walkman,
which I absolutely loved, but I am worried, like, how does that one age? Like, man, anyone younger than me, I'm born in 85, it's probably pushing it. My wife is like 8 years younger than me, and she had CDs her whole life. I don't know if she ever had a Walkman or recorded the radio on the cassettes the way that we did.
It is tough. It is tough to explain what a cassette tape is. And I think just the idea of, like, when you think about vinyl records, cassette tapes, VHS tapes, the idea that the more you use something, like you are actively contributing to its demise.
Right.
Like, the more you played a tape, the more you played a VHS movie over and over again and rewound it and played it again, the more you did that, the more it degraded, the more it broke down. But yeah, so with this cassette tape here, the way she describes it is that, there's one timeline, start to finish, just like on a tape. But it is possible to maybe rewrite over parts of it. But you can only do that so many times before it starts to break down and degrade, which is an interesting fact that will kind of be also framed by what Tiffany learns in her story, which we'll talk about next. The idea that, maybe you can change things, little things here and there. Maybe you can shift things here and there, rewrite them again. But ultimately, the beginning and the end are the same. You're always going to start somewhere. You're always going to end somewhere. Some things are fairly immutable like that. So yeah, it may age the best, or maybe it'll get people reading it to ask the older generations, hey, what was a cassette tape? What was that like? And then if you have a tape deck, you can put one in, and then they can make some comment about what terrible quality it was.
Yeah, and if you really, really miss it, I'm sure you can get them dirt cheap now.
Yeah, you probably got to go to
one of those technologies that's so poor that no one feels nostalgic for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
whereas vinyl, I have a huge vinyl collection, and they still press vinyl.
Well, but they press new vinyl that's like super heavy duty, high grade.
Oh yeah,
it's not going to degrade nearly as fast.
Yeah, and they now, ironically, I think, make cassette tapes. So like local record store day, I got one of my wife's top 5 all-time favorite albums on cassette. It was the Avett Brothers Emotionalism, and they just released it on cassette basically for the hell of it.
But that was a brand new releasing though, brand new pressing. Oh, pressing.
Yeah.
A brand new recording.
As far as I know, the band did it themselves with a CD player from the 90s, where the boombox, where you put the CD in and you hit record on the tape, and you're like, look at that, I crapified my own album.
Absolutely, I made it sound worse.
But that was how I could get things in the car as a kid. We didn't have CD player in the car. Yeah. We had tape players.
Or if you had the adapter that went into the tape deck that connected to your CD player. And we sound a million years old to some people right now.
Yes, we have become the old-timers.
We should probably, we really are. We should probably move on. I did want to point out one thing that that Bronstein says to Mac.
That might be my bookmark, but go on.
Okay, well, so one thing that Bronstein says is that when she got to, after her Wari and Japo left the prehistoric age and got to whatever they were in the late 21st century, she says she went and looked up all 4 of the girls. So she kind of wanted to know what they were up to, what they got into afterwards. And so she knows that Mac passed away young. And she says to her, that she admits it may sound weird coming from someone like her, but that the amount of time we're giving is irrelevant. It's what we choose to do with every second that counts. And that I don't know if that moment is your bookmark.
It's actually it's a tie between that and something from The Grandfather,
Okay. Well,
but yeah.
I wanted to mark that because it isn't my bookmark. I do love it because it actually reminds me of what is possibly my favorite page in the history of comics, which is from The Sandman, number 43, written by Neil Gaiman. It's a moment where a character named Bernie, he is killed walking down the street as a brick wall kind of randomly collapses and falls on him and he dies. Sorry for spoilers, but there's a good chance you've seen this page or these panels and not know where they are. But when you die, you're confronted by death, the personification of death of the endless. And Bernie says to death, hey, I mean, I got what, 15,000 years? That's pretty good, isn't it? I lived a long time. Because this character Bernie is kind of a fairly immortal. Said over 15,000 years he's lived, and he's a little dismayed that he died by a brick wall randomly falling on him. But he's looking at death and saying, "Hey, that's pretty good, right? I had a long time to live." And death responds to him, "You lived what anybody gets, Bernie. You got a lifetime. No more, no less. You got a lifetime." And that's maybe the most famous line out of all of Sandman, which is really saying something. And it's a really beautiful page and beautiful sentiment that I think we'll have a copy of that page up on the show notes for this episode. But it just reminded me of that, you know, when we talk about how much time you have in life is clearly unknown. I guess unless you're Mac in this case. And so it's less about how much of it and what you do with it, because what you get is a lifetime. And I think that's
but I think Mac sees the wisdom in that because she's one of the ones who has no protest about wiping their minds at the end. Because she's like, well, and everything. Well, because Dr. Bronstein could not have had a better pairing here, because
definitely, yeah,
Mac has already accepted, like, I die when I die. Yeah. I'm going to keep living now. I'm not afraid of living.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reason she's the one who's down for that, because yes, she understands she's going to lose all these memories, but for her, I think the big trade-off is she doesn't want to know. She wants to remove that bit of knowledge that she's going to die in 4 years or about 4 years.
Right.
You know, that's a burden for her, but she still has the mindset. But really, though, you could argue that from what we've seen about Mac, that she's always had that mindset. You know, the idea of kind of living maybe in the moment, living free, you know, that's kind of inherent in her, whether or not she knew she had a fate that was a lot shorter than one would expect.
So
that is just kind of who Mac is.
Do you want to change your answer from the first episode? If you could find out when you're going to die?
No, I would not. I am still... It is a question I thought about on multiple occasions.
Would really change your mind.
There are you made a great point that first episode, but it is a question that is, because it comes up in fiction and storytelling all the time, not just in this story, but the idea of knowing your fate, of that question is such a popular one, and I've thought about it, and then I think if I knew exactly when, yeah, I think I would take that. I think I would find it freeing in a way. Maybe more so than the way I look at life right now, which is maybe a little more, as we described the old timers, the idea of maybe being resistant to some change. The idea that
right. Yeah, no, I see that.
Stasis is potentially better than taking a big swing on something, because, you know, as you get older in life, yeah, you view risk differently. True. I think I still would.
No, I
think I still would.
So for me, it's that I think a lot of people wait until they suspect they are close to the end to really make peace and come to terms with life and what it is and how precious it is and how we're not really owed anything other than what we get.
Yeah.
And I would prefer to be doing that through my entire life rather than have some deadline where I need to sit down and think about that stuff, but I don't have to do that for 5 more years because I've got 6 years left. I would like to do that now, and I'm ready. You know,
that's interesting.
I have no intention of dying anytime soon, but no one does.
I think if I knew my end, however far it was, I wouldn't look at it like, well, I'll think about the stuff in a couple years because I still got 5 left. I think I would look at it from the idea of this is what I have left, so I will use all of it now. You know, I think I would have that perspective throughout from the moment of knowing kind of when my end would be. I think I wouldn't put it off and have that reflection. I think I would come to that a little sooner. I think that's just how I'm wired. I think I would come to that perspective sooner.
Yeah, and I'm saying I don't need that information to come to it sooner. You know, that's I can't sleep at night unless I think through things like that for a certain amount of time every day. But I think that's I don't think that I'm rare in that way. I think I'm being honest about it. And I think that's why books like, I mean, basically anything by Brian K. Vaughan, I think that's why it strikes a chord, is that he has this really raw, brutal honesty, but not abrasive way of having you wrestle with questions that you're probably wrestling with anyway.
They're things you've thought of. They're things you've experienced. They're just maybe skewed a little bit in the fantastical or in the, you know, in the otherworldly, but at the core,
or in the crass.
There is more than just a kernel of truth and realism to it, you know? And I think Mac is one of those characters that like Mac's about as real as you get, you know, in terms of her perspective on the world and her attitude. I think there's someone, you know, that, you know, would agree with you in the idea of, hey, you know, I don't need to know what my end is. You know, if it's going to come, it's going to come. But, you know, she needs to live life kind of on her terms. And it's actually very similar to her knowing her end. The idea that she's going to live it to a fullest. She's going to experience everything she can. She's going to kind of do what she wants and have that perspective now. And she doesn't need to know that it's allegedly going to end in only a few years from her.
And to quote another great character who knew his own death, you know, she knows that in 1991 she will die as surely as the Chudley Cannons will finish last place, which is book 6 of Harry Potter is one of my all-time favorites because you just see how, I guess you don't really see it all till book 7, but you just like a cheapskate trying to squeeze every ounce of toothpaste out of the tube. That's what Dumbledore does to life. He's like, I'm just getting the maximum amount of every second I have left, like teeing up everything, helping everyone reach their best self while doing all that I can to eradicate evil.
Well, and again, it's a character that knows exactly, or presume he knows, because if it wasn't going to be Malfoy, it was going to be Snape. He knew his end was coming, and so he's putting all his pieces on the board, and obviously he's thinking about, you know, he's playing like 14D chess in terms of what he's setting up. But yeah, the idea of he knows he has a time limit. He knows he's arranged to have an end, and the way he looks at it is, I'm going to do everything I can, and yet still be incredibly cryptic about things because he is Dumbledore, so he can't just give a straight answer. But still, the idea
I do have to appreciate
him knowing
that is the edge Mac has over Dumbledore. Shots fired. She is a blunt instrument, and
Mac comes right out and says it. And I think that's what makes her such a really kind of an intriguing character, and one you really root for, and you see that. You know, he talks about it with Bronstein here about how like none of this is fair, you know, because life isn't about being fair. You know, it's never fair. But you know, that's kind of just how it goes sometimes.
And you're getting to my other quote that the future is never fair, just inevitable.
Yes.
That's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good. Doesn't that feel like one of those just like free floating thoughts in Saga that you would just you would just like scroll past like some crude panel of someone having sex, and those haunting words would be in the corner,
and it would be in the handwritten style, the handwritten lettering that Fiona Staples does, which is, you know, that's Hazel's recollection, right? You know, when it's written that
hauntingly,
way, and
just like foreboding presence over the story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of thing you would see. But yeah, so you know, Eventually we do see Dr. Bronstein. She does eventually pass away, but not before that, the tear in space-time occurs, and it gives them a literal view of again, 11,706 BCE, which, and we actually see that view, and it's the same mountain carving that we saw in at the end of Volume 2 to start to lead into Volume 3, except noticeably the Apple logo is missing this time, but it is the same mountain, and Bronstein sees that, and she's reminded, that's the time and place where, she met her daughter. She definitely views Wari as her daughter, and Japo as her son. Even though she knows the truth, she did raise them. And there is kind of a beautiful moment. That's kind of the last thing she sees, the last thing that goes through her mind, before she passes away.
Incredible character for someone that frankly was a bit of a snooze in her introduction in book 3. Becomes compelling and central to the plot. And this, it's also just like the economy of storytelling is that in this story, he does not introduce disposable characters. Jude dies in the first one, but you get Jude here again. Charlotte dies in the 5th one, but you get Charlotte here again. It's just a great economy of storytelling. He's not introducing, 100 faceless, nameless characters to just be little exposition bots. They all become meaningful characters.
And really, Bronstein was one of the few left at the end of Volume 5 where whose fate we didn't actually know. We get the story from Wari about how, we see them.
Right, you get the little flashback, so she's not
flashbacks. Dead. Yeah, well, she didn't die.
She didn't die
back
when
then.
She was covered in blood saying run.
And you know that they go to the future and that she raises Wari and Japo. And then now we see Wari and Japo as significantly older people. And the assumption is, well, if they're this old, then maybe Bronstein she's just passed away at this point, But we don't actually get confirmation of that. We don't know what happened to her. So there is one of the kind of the rare open questions. And then here, boom, she shows up at the same timeline that Mac is at, and she gets this kind of beautiful close to her story. Before she dies, she instructs Mac, take her ship, that beta version ship that came to save them back in prehistoric time. She used that to come to the end of the world, end of life. And Mac gets in it and instructs it to take her back to the moment this all started, which was the early hours of Hell Morning, November 1st, 1988. And that ends Mac's story for those first 3 issues.
Yes. And then we go to Tiff.
And then we go to Tiffany. And Tiffany has
Tiff low-key
the real
becoming the best character?
Maybe. I mean, well, and also she has
happened until Applebee's.
Yeah.
But since Y2K,
exactly.
she has been.
It took the first 3 arcs. She was really kind of you could argue the 4th most important kind of character there. She had gotten the least amount of characterization and least amount of story, but the back half she's like total MVP. And I think her story here is the weightiest because I think we get the most exposition, the most story, and kind of the most answers through her story. So she is also way in the future, still in Stony Stream. And again, this is the I don't know, the idealized paradise. War's over here. The place where Clone Aaron was trying to send them. This is the time when we know the war is done. And of course, she finds out that the reason she's there, she learns from another version of Clone Aaron. The reason Tiffany is there is to help end the war, which is confusing for her because she's in a time when the war has already ended. But that's not another one of those quirky time travel things,
Right.
Yeah.
But the utopia of global peace.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, it sounds lovely had we not already skipped past it to the end of the world.
Yes.
That's the real rub here is man, even the achievement of global peace after the war ends, this little glimpse, but Dr. Bronstein says, that's just a blip for the universe.
because in the end, sometimes there are things that are outside of your control, which is where when we talk about Bronstein talking about the idea of maybe there being a high power involved, it's the idea that we, humanity, may not be in full control of everything that goes on, that we can do everything we can on this earth, and yet there will come a time when some sort of gamma burst from something nearby will eradicate all life on Earth, and that's game over.
Yeah.
And
frankly, I believe this notion that time is like a cassette tape is unique to this story. I don't think there's any other time travel principles that exactly match this. There are closer and further ones, but this is a unique take on it. That you can go rewrite it, but if you overdub it too many times or replay it too many times, you'll break it.
Which is the thing that grandfather's worried about. If we don't put these girls back, if they stay out and things keep changing, that's going to destroy time.
Well, I believe he's correct. Everyone acknowledges
he
that.
He probably is correct. But I think the idea that yes, there's time travel, and yes, you can edit things here and there and change things here and there, but not really affect, you're not making changes like Back to the Future, where every time you go back, something monumental will change, And so it does kind of question the idea of, well, but what about the viewpoint from our three teenage boy time travelers, that your end is your end? Well, maybe that's still the case, that even though you can maybe slightly rewrite things here and there, your end is still your end. You still reach the end of the tape. No matter what you do, that beginning and that end are still the same. But it is a version of time travel theory that we haven't quite seen before. It's closest to what I described as the Harry Potter version, the idea that everything that happens has already happened before, to the point where they even they talk about that here.
They do bank on it, but
they do. Yeah,
the final panel of the series.
I want when we get to that, I want to discuss that because here, this future crew, which is kind of two versions of Clone Aaron, an older version of Clone KJ, and an older version of 2000 Tiffany, who we find out didn't die in that explosion, but was pulled from that by these future people into this future right before it exploded, and where she could grow old, and she's much older now. But this machine they strap Tiffany into, which is the idea of speaking back and connecting back with her friends through their dreams. Tiffany has this kind of trepidation of well, what if it doesn't work? And it's older version of herself that says, well, of course it's going to work because it already has. And that's that Harry Potter idea of time travel, that the things you're going to do are going to work in the past because we're already here in it in the future. We've already seen the results of it. You just haven't experienced it yet. And so, this future crew, as I kind of dubbed them, they definitely believe that even though we find out that they've made all these little tweaks, they've made all these changes, that there are some events that no matter what, they're always going to hold. And this is going to work, and it's going to result in this truce, it's going to result in a truce in the past that they are already living in. So which is how they know it's going to happen already. But
I think
when we get to the very end, I think it brings into question. The end of the series brings that a little bit into question.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do wonder if we're giving Harry Potter too much credit. It's like one line in one chapter of one book. Time travel never comes up again in the series. I'm not sure it's as robust or as thought through as it should be or ought to be. I think there's a reason J.K. smashed the time turners.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, and then also, and let's be honest, if you've read Cursed Child, the script of Cursed Child or seen Cursed Child, it completely goes against the canon rules that were established in Prisoner of Azkaban. But the events of that book make it very clear that in the moment that book came out and through the rest of the time there, that we with the only time we have a time travel is that everything is set, that nothing ever changes, that there is just one timeline, and that's the version of it. And
yes. I agree with that. Yeah. I just think it's strange that Harry is the one who says, well, I did this thing because I figured I've already done it. And it's, again, it's like, just because a character says that doesn't mean it's true. Although I do think it was true, I also think it was strange that Hermione didn't understand that articulation of it when she herself would not go back to a class she missed because she already missed it.
Well, yes, because she hadn't done it. She can't go back to class because she hadn't been to the class. Harry could do this from his perspective because he already knows it happens.
Right, but those are two sides of the same coin. Hermione understood it in the negative. Harry understood it in the positive. Like she knew I couldn't go do this because I hadn't already done it. He knew I can't do this because I have already. Yeah. Anyway, I think Brian K. Vaughan has thought through this a lot more than J.K. Rowling did.
I think so. Now there
not
actually
trying to
is.
Throw shade. I just think one of these was really meticulous, and one of them was a plot tool for one book.
Well, and let's be clear about something. The version of time travel that shows up in Prison of Azkaban is actually the easiest version of time travel to write because you're not worried about alternate versions, alternate histories, things changing. You simply write it from one perspective. If you say the past never changes, the future never changes, it's actually the easiest way to write it if it's completely rigid. If time is completely rigid and never changes, all you do is change your character's perspective. It's much harder to write a story like that from, like, let's say Back to the Future, where every time you go back in time, something changes, but yet not everything changes. So you have to shape your rules. So some characters remember, some don't, blah, blah, blah. It gets a lot more complicated if you really break it down. If you say it's completely rigid, and thus there are no rules because nothing ever changes. It's just the fact that if you've done it, you can do it.
Right. And honestly,
it's the most streamlined way to write time travel.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I think Paper Girls is kind of a cleaned up version of like Flash comics. Because I don't know if you're much of a Flash reader, but they do some really messy junk with time travel in the Flash.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, this, person died here, but there's some remnant variant of them floating around in nebulous timeline structure, and there are like cascading remnants of timelines that still exist, and it's like, I think that's actually pretty similar to the cassette thing. Like, that's kind of like saying, this person, you killed off their younger self here, but their older self still has this imprint future in a future point in the tape that hasn't been overwritten yet, so that can simultaneously exist while the younger self doesn't exist. And
well, it would be like if you maybe a little more like if you kept recording over an old VHS tape, and then as you're watching something, maybe you get like a frame, a weird a weird double exposure that didn't quite erase, and something bled through. And you're like, wait, what was that?
At the very beginning of like video cassettes. Because each VCR would start recording at a certain interval after it stopped. And so you could see the thing you taped over just briefly. And I think that's that's the Flash, and that's kind of Paper Girls.
Well, I think that's what he's trying to get at with the cassette tape metaphor. The idea that, I don't know if he really means to talk about that, but the idea of writing over parts of it does kind of faintly imply that maybe there's a remnant there. And we actually see some of that later in something that what Tiffany tries to do, because while she's in this future time period with this crew here, this is where she learns that their memories will be erased. And when she learns this, like, she's appalled about that. She's like, no, you can't, like, this has been like the best couple of days of my life.
Yes.
Being around these girls and doing this stuff. Like, how can you erase it? And of course their answer is, well, we have to erase it because, the 2000 version of herself, she doesn't remember anything before then. So if she doesn't remember it, then you can't remember it. So we've already erased your memories. But yeah, she's appalled by that. And then when everyone, at the end of issue 28, when everyone eventually makes their way to, what's the date? Stony Stream on August 2nd, 1831, which the future crew has picked as like neutral ground. When everyone finally kind of makes their way there, and there's a confrontation between grandfather and our future crew from the idealized future there. While they're having their talk about the truce and stopping all time travel and blah 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 blah, and the idea of your memory being erased still being out there, we see Tiffany. She is she's clutching onto that Apple device, the one with like the brain interface, and she's gripping it so hard her hands are bleeding, and she's repeating over and over again,
we're not just
a
paper
phrase.
girls.
We're friends.
Yeah.
She's saying it over and over again, like she's trying to will that into something that'll hang on through. And I think that's the idea of, that's kind of the implicit idea of that tape metaphor, the idea that you can rewrite things, and maybe you can rewrite things over and over again.
Yes,
you can never
she knew where the whole
fully erase
conversation was going and where it was ending.
Yeah.
And she had the best strategy. Although I thought after that, she deserved to be the one to say, wait, on the final panel.
Maybe so. But, as we get there, the kind of the one last thing that needs to be pointed out is we see the final image from KJ's vision, which is the image of grandfather. He's got his arm around Aaron, and he's pointing a gun at someone, and he says, "I'm sorry." And that's right after the future crew, they give the proposal for stopping all time travel, and at this point, I guess Joppo is completely distrusting of his descendants, and he's like, "I've been burned before," so clearly he's gonna shoot one of them or someone because he doesn't believe this truce is a real thing. And then right before that happens, one of the Editrix things show up, and crucially latches on to grandfather and shows him the truth about his life, and that's what gives him a moment of clarity, I guess. And honestly, he takes it pretty well.
He does. I think he proves himself to not be a villain.
Yeah, because you would think finding out that your relationships with everyone and the circumstances around your birth and your life and the meaning of your life, or what you thought the meaning of your life was completely wrong. By
the way, just as a quick aside on the grandfather, who, by the way, I think could have his own episode, of the podcast. Probably. We're not going to, but he could. Can we just say that his theory of pillaging the past comes from the Loki show, or vice versa? He was like, "You want to know where we got all these dinosaurs? We waited till right before the comet hit." And it's I just got the picture of Loki dancing around.
He was like, if we take them right before they would have gone extinct anyway, you know what? Nothing changes in the timeline.
There's no butterfly flaps, nothing.
We don't mess anything up. If we take them out right before then and we save a couple of them, we're good to go. But he finds out his whole life has basically been a lie, and he takes it pretty well. I mean, he just kind of like, wow, I'm not who I thought I was, and he's like, you know what? Truce, I'm good. And it does feel kind of sudden. So you kind of wonder if he's always known that there's something wasn't right about him, that the story of his life wasn't quite right, and this was just like full confirmation, or maybe there's also some like empathic part of these beings that when you're shown these parts of your life are also giving some understanding to them. I don't know how it works.
I mean, it did it did bring on like an instant when KJ touched it.
That is true.
She instantly was like, all right, well, I got to start pursuing this relationship with Mac now.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Maybe there's something about it.
And it wasn't. It didn't change her in terms of who she was. Yeah. But she then became much more clear about who she was and started acting in line with who she was. And I think that's the same thing with grandfather.
Yeah.
So
maybe there is some empathic part of it that when it shows you some level of it,
a big showdown,
there's an idea that,
and there's no it's not.
There's one shot.
I was gonna say there's no shots, and I was like, nope, the one was bleeding.
The Editrix thing shoots.
None of our characters
Joppo
were bleeding.
Once.
None of our characters became morally compromised, which makes it really a feel-good story. This is not an anti-hero story. which is a genre I'm so sick of I could vomit.
Yeah. Listen, not everything has to be dark and gritty and all of that. But yeah, no.
And Brian K. Vaughan is somehow gritty without being dark.
Yeah, well, he has stories that are like that. They're very dark. Yeah, absolutely. But here it does. It ends ultimately with everyone deciding to walk away. The truce is in place, and that's your big conclusion. Your big conclusion is everyone decides to end all time travel.
And to me, that seems like the only truce that would ever work. It's a truce where neither side is resentful. If you go into like World War I end of negotiations and you just are extremely punitive toward one country, that's going to foster resentment and lead to the next World War. Indirectly. Yeah. But that was a broad strokes definition of history, and I apologize to any historians out there.
Yeah, if you're a high school student, do not use that.
Not use that on the AP test.
No,
you will be
very
taking
bad.
that class again in college.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely, it's the idea that if everyone agrees to give up the one thing that's their advantage, the descendants, the kids in the future, their advantage is they can hop through time and get stuff to improve their present or their potential future, and the same advantage is for grandfather in cathedral that they can jump through time and reset things and chase after them. So if everyone's walking away from that, and we just say from here on out, no one's doing anything. Obviously, we can't change any incursions that have already happened. But if we say from right here going forward, we're done, then everyone wins because everyone essentially loses. And that's your big climactic showdown.
Yes,
which I think is pretty great.
Yes. So, final issue. Now we've covered the last panel of 29, 30.
Yeah. Another
dream sequence.
Yes,
but not from the future.
As you're reading it, also, but whose dream is it?
That's a great question. I was assuming, in each time that I've read it, that it was KJ's dream. I think.
Yeah.
But
see, the way I look at it is, it's all their dreams.
Oh, they all have a shared dream.
It's a shared dream situation.
Which maybe the idea that Tiff sent there before coming back.
Yeah. It could be because she shows
she
up. She
knows exactly what's going to happen. Yes,
yes,
when Tiff goes back to 1831, she knows exactly what's going to happen. They're going to correct the timeline. They're going to get that straight. So Tiff sends this back. That just occurred to me.
Which is why which is why she's gripping that Apple device so hard, because she knows that's like some interface that they use as part of the machine. The machine they use for her to contact her friends through her dreams. So she's trying to put that, will that into that device. The idea that they're friends, they know each other, and so they have this shared
dream backward.
Yeah. And even we see a little cameo from, I think it's KJ's mom. She makes a point. Well, all of them make a point that they've overslept, that they're all a little late today.
Yes.
And KJ's mom's like, well, I would have woken you, but it looked like you were having such a wonderful dream, And KJ's kind of like, yeah, it kind of was. And they all kind of realize that maybe this is what it was, even though they don't know what the dream meant. And then from there we get what is basically like a full mimicking of issue 1. We see with just some minor tweaks, the idea that things have been changed ever so slightly. Mac goes out and she runs into Tiffany. I think she asked Tiffany if she's seen KJ, and Tiff's like, no, but I saw the new girl.
Right. And then I
gave her one of my walkie-talkies.
The full page Mac looking cool, standing up to bullies.
Yeah. But
they're all
but this time
people.
It's the same teenagers, but this time Aaron is with them and KJ is the one being bullied. And, it's the same dialogue from Mac, except, in that first issue, she drops the homophobic slur.
Right.
And in this one, she hesitates and then goes with fart mouth, which
it's still not offensive.
I don't know.
Still not offensive. 2022.
Yeah.
Holds up well.
Yeah. But
I mean, not a good burn, but not offensive.
Not a great burn. Yeah. But it's like, well, is that another sign of like a subconscious change in Mac? Also, when she asked Tiffany if she's seen KJ, she's kind of not certain why she's asking that, but maybe there is something there, and so we see these things of, and of course after that, the four of them again, like in the first issue, they decided to go right off together and stick together to avoid random teenagers or whatnot. And then we get this little scene of an old woman in a station wagon who cuts them off in the street,
right.
And it saves them, very Back to the Future style of it saves them from going into an intersection and potentially getting hit by some joyriding teen.
Right.
It's like
it's like Back to the Future 3, yeah.
Yeah, when Flea is taunting Michael J. Fox and instead of racing him, he goes in reverse and he realizes if he would have done that, he would have gotten into an accident, which leads to the crippled hand that we saw. Yeah, in part 2. So it's the same kind of thing of, someone looking out for them. They don't know who it is. Of course, we, the audience, see that it's Wari. It's an old version of
the
Wari.
oldest version of Wari.
Yes.
And you have to wonder, had she always time traveled back to this point to save them, or was she the very last time traveler? After the truce, she went back and was like, we owe everything, all the global peace to these girls. We're going to save them. And this is the one thing
because
I'm doing.
this is one scene we don't see in the first. We don't. I guess we don't get that far into their journey because they do split up to deliver the papers. So we don't know if that there's been someone in this station wagon who's been watching out for them. Although Tiffany does say that she recognizes her. So in this timeline, this is someone who maybe has been looking out for them, and Tiffany recognizes the woman in that station wagon again. But yeah, we don't see this happen in the first issue. So yeah, I think my read was what your read was, the idea that this is a new thing that Wari has done, kind of at the end to say,
these kids deserve a break. Yeah.
We need to protect them in this timeline. So yeah, then,
I don't think they have infinite passes like that, but I think it was like, no, they deserve these few years together
on this day. Yeah. Maybe so. Yeah.
And by the way, I tried to decrypt the license plates. I couldn't do anything with them.
I did too. I looked at it as well and thought, is there something here? And then
you would not make it that readable if there wasn't anything there. Right?
I'm with you, but
because the other one was in the very beginning it was BKV something, and it was like, okay, that's clearly our author's name. So then I was like going back, and I was like, no, that's not the artist, that's not the penciler, the letterist. So
we're looking at, what is it?
It's 884 BRN or
BRN. Yeah.
And then 254 AXY.
Yeah, I
can't make heads or tails of it.
Yeah,
but that's
I don't
great
know.
discussion for all our fellow paper girls nerds.
I'm going to assume it means something to them.
It can't mean nothing. Even if it's just inside joke.
Exactly. Yes, 100%. That may be reference to someone personal, who knows? But yeah, it's too obvious to not have it be completely made up. I mean, hell, those could have been the actual license plates of their cars growing up. Who knows? Maybe it's something as simple as that. But yeah. So as we come down to the end of the issue here, the girls go and they take a break. They all have a smoke, and then Tiffany says, "Hey, I'm probably going to quit my route," which is consistent with what we heard from 2000 Tiffany, that she quits her route, pretty much right after this one night together, which is one of the reasons why none of them stay friends. They never stay together again. That this is the end of it, and when they finish out their routes, we get that scene of them. They're at a 4-way intersection and they're all going a different way. They all ride off in a different direction.
Except Erin is still sitting there facing them. She has not turned her back on the route yet.
Yeah.
But yes.
I don't know if you saw the show. Ever saw the show Leverage? It was on TNT. It's about a bunch of thieves who come together, but it was very famous for this overhead shot because when they're thieves and they're they're kind of Robin Hoods. They're literally Robin Hoods. But it had an overhead shot of our main characters, like at the end of a job, and they would walk away in different directions. That was like as them leaving. They did that a bunch of times, and it reminded me of that. And it's very literal here at an intersection. They all go the different ways until Aaron shouts.
Well, and I love the clicking out, just showing like how small and insignificant they are.
Exactly.
And in the void of the black, the weight. That literally changes the universe. But it's so cinematic in the ending here. I just love it so much. It's so beautiful, and they really got me the first time. I thought it was just like, wow. I guess it's still technically a happy ending. I would have liked to see them get back together, but they did save everything, and it did exactly what they told us the rules were. But then you get the weight, and it's like, oh, thank God.
And then you see that in the end it comes down to, and I get the sense too, and maybe it was just, and I don't know if it was read this way, but in the paneling there, right when, after the weight that comes out in the black, the next page, she's like, you guys hold up. And we get close-ups of like everyone, like a handbrake, pedal brake and all of that. I almost get the sense, the way I read that was like each one of the other three girls, like they were waiting for someone to say, hey, stop.
Yeah.
It was like they're riding away, but like they're not really riding away. Like they're waiting for one of them to say, "Hey, hold up a second."
I think they all sense there's something wrong about their agreement to part ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when Aaron does that, they all react instantly because it felt like they were all waiting for that. And so when Aaron says, "Hey, I got like an hour to kill before I got ready for school. Do you want to keep riding?" And they're all like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then that final shot of them riding off, after the punch buggy thing. Is that still a thing too? Punch buggy, is that a thing? Do we need to explain that to the used as well? Oh God, I don't want to sound any older than we already are. Yeah. Google punch buggy, no punchbacks. But there is that beautiful sense of like, because again, it goes back to, what did 2016 Aaron say to her younger self? What did 2000 Tiffany say to her younger self? What did Tiffany herself say back in 1831? The idea that, hey, keep these girls in your life. If I could change one thing, it would be stay friends with these girls. And the idea that maybe just that can change the course of their life. Not any other big decisions, not changing what job they take, what major they do in school, anything like that. Just maybe having these girls as friends at that time in their life, maybe that's what it takes. And it's just a beautiful shot of them going out the riding away together. It's one of the really great and perfect endings I think you're going to get in comics.
Absolutely. And by the way, I just realized in my deluxe edition, I have had the alien font decoder all along in the back of deluxe edition volume 3.
Oh shit!
As I just flipped to the last page, I was like, "Shoot, this thing I've been thinking like, man, how did people figure that out?"
Well, I think people actually figured it out before. I think one of the issues I think had that in the back matter.
Okay.
I think so. Which is why it's in the deluxe edition. But yeah, no. We talked about at the beginning. We want to talk about endings and how difficult they are. And I think Paper Girls is an incredibly
top 5,
incredibly rare instance where you just get the perfect ending to a story.
Well, and as I read my review from Goodreads on the first time I read volume 3, I was like, they're just keep berating me with information and no revelation about where this is going. Is he just throwing a lot of stuff out here to see what sticks? Or does he have a plan? And at the end of 4, my review was like, oh, it seems like he might actually have a plan. At the end of 5, it was like, oh boy, we're getting stuff now. And the end of 6, it was like 5 stars. I have no words. It's just perfect.
Well, and again, as we talked about, when you finish 3, you don't know that you're right at the middle point. You don't know you're right at the top of the hill on the roller coaster. And it seems like, boy, what was that for? Why did we just spend those issues back in prehistoric, like what were those new characters introduced for? And then you hit the back half, which again, you don't know it's the back half yet. But 4, 5, and 6 are just bang, 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 and you see how it wraps up, and you start seeing how it ties together. And the more you go, you're absolutely right. You're like, you start seeing it. You start seeing the whole story. You see how it ties back, and you start seeing where it might go. And I think I'm with you. I remember reading that last issue and thinking, oh, it's kind of a bummer. Like, things don't change, do they?
Right.
You know? Like,
which is fair. They telegraphed it the whole time.
Exactly.
He had every right to tell that story.
Yeah. You see, so things are slightly different. We've tweaked things a little bit, but in the end, oh man, like they don't stay
and
friends.
Mac's still going to die in 3 or 4 years.
Exactly. Yeah. And even with this ending right here, it's, as far as we know, it's still going to happen. But now you think about what are those 4 years going to be like with these three, with those 3 girls in her life now,
right?
With KJ being in her life now, you think about how much richer and fuller a life that might be versus whatever it would have been. But yeah, you get to those last couple pages and it's just like, it's total gut punch. You're like, oh no, maybe things can change. Maybe they can go, and it's not a big thing. It's actually a really small thing of just, hey, let's go for a ride for another hour or so,
right?
Non-working. And maybe that's all it takes for these girls to be in each other's lives for as long as they have.
And for all we know, the future truce and these girls could have a butterfly effect that would keep Dr. Bronstein from inventing time travel, which would have prevented their thing from happening, which means Mac wouldn't have 40C. You could really have a positive spin if you wanted it.
Oh, that totally reminds me of a point I had there. When we see Aaron wake up, her sister Missy notices that she has the mark on her stomach, the scar from being shot. Why does she have that? Because technically she gets that later in the day, on this day. She gets shot later. But because now there's no time travel, it doesn't happen, but it has. So
it's the fuzzy tape. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that goes to the idea, if you want to view it that way, of they have already done this and now we're starting over again. And now there is no more time travel, but she still has this remnant there. And that maybe Dr. Bronstein never invents time travel. Maybe now they never see, because as far as we know, they didn't encounter the time travel ship in the basement.
Yeah, which frankly,
that was the whole thing.
This is like the most comic thing ever, because this is like basically every time the DC or Marvel universe tries to reset their continuity. And it's like, okay, New 52, Rebirth, we're starting at number 1. And they don't show Bruce's parents getting shot again. The Riddler pops up and he's not like, who is that? It's like, there's still all this history here. It's just like, there's no specific story that will reference that you'll feel lost with.
Every reboot for those big 2 franchises relies on the fact that you actually have some knowledge of what already exists.
Right. It's just saying we're not building on any particular piece of it.
Yeah.
We're building on kind of the just mountain of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of it's kind of like, I think of a comic continuity itself being like the tape. It's like a cassette tape.
Oh, definitely. I mean, 100% for superhero stuff at the big 2. I mean, without a doubt. You can change things and whatever you want. The kind of the rule for a lot of writers and creators is, like, when people ask them what's canon, the answer is whatever's good. Like whatever that person, the person writing it decides at the point is, this is canon now. I don't care if it appeared in one issue 30 years ago. If
and
I
by
like
the way,
it,
this
I'm going
is
to make that
also
now.
similar to Morning Glories, which is much more convoluted.
If that's a book we ever dive into, boy,
if we have listeners, we won't after that.
That'll
Especially
be tough. That's
since
a tough one to go through.
Never okay, but does that not prove the point? That whole time you're like, Nick Spencer, you're dragging me along. You just keep introducing new characters. I swear, every book there's a new character that I get a backstory for, and then it just ends and it never comes back, and we will never know exactly what that stinking academy was for, what really happened at the end of the first story arc there, and that's being a comic reader. And that's like, let's be conservative and say that was $3 an issue, even though I think it was $4. I think it's $3.99.
It might have been, yeah.
But it was like 51 issues at $3 an issue.
It was 50 issues.
Yeah, it's 50 issues at $3 an issue. So you spent $150 and years of your life reading that, and you are left with nothing. To be fair, I like it a lot, but you are technically left with nothing. You get no resolution.
So
no closure.
That's one of those stories. That's one of those stories where, if you talk about and discuss it, it's all about process. It's not about the result, because you don't get a result. Right. That's one of those books that is written from the perspective of, the actual important thing is the mechanics of the storytelling, of being clever and making this a reference to this, reference to this, reference to this, reference to this from 8 issues ago. It's all about the mechanics of hey, look how clever it was. This thing you saw in issue 7 is now important in issue 40. You know, right. It's making those callbacks, and it's doing that though at the expense of like actual storytelling and resolution. While a book like Paper Girls, which obviously is significantly shorter, it's 30 issues versus 50, the mechanics are not the point.
Right.
The mechanics of time travel,
of the plot,
the mechanics of storytelling,
and they don't replace the plot.
The callbacks and like the mimicking of the issues and actual panel layouts, things that the reader notices. Those things aren't what's clever about it. That's not the importance of it. What's important is the characters and their presentation and how the readers feel about them at the end, because that's where the investment is. And I think that's the difference between a writer like BKV and the collaborators he works with. They understand that. And I think some writers out there, especially comic writers, who try to be incredibly clever, lose sight of that. And it becomes about the mechanics of the storytelling. That becomes the issue, and not just the storytelling. It's something that I think the TV show got lost in, no pun intended, that in the middle there, they got so wrapped up with trying to be clever or trying to be seen as being clever. Right. That I think they lost their way a little bit. So when they decided to end the show and started focusing on storytelling, there was a whole swath of viewers who were like, wait. We don't care about that. We want stuff to point at. We want Easter eggs. That's what the show's about. And then they were like, no. That's not what the show was actually about. But because that's what they were presenting to the audience, right, it got lost. You know, that got lost in translation from creator to audience. And so when you get caught up in stuff like that and trying to look clever, like, oh, obviously we planned this from the start because this thing that we put in issue 2 is relevant now in issue 50. You know, that shows how smart I was.
Right. Which can be manufactured in either direction. And that's not what impresses me about Paper Girls.
No.
But
even though it does do that. Even though it does do that. It does do it.
And it does it, and they clearly knew the whole time. Like, issue 30 could have been issue 1. Like,
yes,
he could have done, and that's what, if people like, you know, JJ, you know, had the foresight, they would know exactly where everything's going, and they would love making the last episode the first episode, and then just ending the series on the penultimate episode and being like, you've already seen the ending. Go back and watch season 1, episode 1 again. Yeah. I would love it if a TV show did that. Paper Girls could do that. But, I can't tell you how many times in my 10 or less years of reading comics, I've just been like devastated and livid about the hours and dollars and things that I spent on arcs that went nowhere. And twice in the last year, my favorite creator, Jeff Lemire, has let me down with Primordial and May's book, all of which I enjoyed every page.
I like May's book. I like May's book more than Primordial did.
Okay. Yeah, okay, but I was still a little let down. Like, oh, it was all this mystery and intrigue and stuff, and it was just another internal exploration, and it was only 5 issues, and then it was over, and it was like you met the next door neighbor. I like that kind of subtlety, but we've been there so many times with Jeff Lemire.
That's kind of his ethos.
But I know. But the art was beautiful. Same in Sorrentino on Primordial. That was one that was like, okay, you've got this like deep state conspiracy stuff and this, and this, and then it was just over. And it was like, did someone hold a gun to your head and say you have to end this right now? But it was announced 5 issues from the beginning.
Yeah, well, and that is, that's always it's a tough thing.
And I think you
with
informed
comics.
me on Royal City, which was a series I enjoyed immensely. That felt like it ended out of nowhere, and that was creator driven.
Yeah, and I'll relate a story there. I think it was in one of the back matters. Jeff Lemire, he said the idea was that Royal City was to go on a lot longer, but it ended at 12 issues. I think it was 12, right?
Yeah, it was 12 or 13. I think it was 12.
I think it was 12. I think it was 12. But the reason he ended it and it felt kind of rushed was because he said that as he was writing the story, he realized what the end was. He didn't know when he started, but as he got through it, he realized what the end was. And once he figured out what the ending was, like he couldn't delay it. He just had to get there because he understood how to finish it. And so it does feel a little rushed, and sometimes that happens. And sometimes there are outside forces, especially in comics, completely independent of what the creators want to do. Maybe it's a publisher thing.
Well, and sometimes the creator having all the control is not necessarily the best thing. Yeah. If Royal City were at one of the big two, they would have been like, absolutely not. We have you on this title. You're here. Yeah. You said 25 issues. You will give us 25 issues. And he may have had to say, okay, I'm going to blow the big twist in 12, and then I got to come up with the next twist to keep the series going.
And at the same time,
it might have been great.
At the same time, they could say, you're on this for 25 issues. And then at 15, they can be like, you know what? We think we're done. That's it. And
that's true.
You've set it up.
Tom King Batman.
But also, but one thing you mentioned, when you mentioned Morning Glories, one of the reasons, at least I believe this, I don't have a confirmation. One of the reasons I believe that book suffered was because as it got towards the end, Nick Spencer was getting really big at Marvel. He had started off doing some smaller stuff, and then like Superior Foes of Spider-Man, which is a really funny book and all that. And then he was given Amazing Spider-Man, And now all of a sudden he's on a big flagship title and given more and more stuff. He was eventually given Secret Empire, which I thought was terrible, but it was still a massive line-wide book. So when you're given all this this huge stuff to do, for hire stuff, sometimes your creator-owned stuff can take a back seat because that's at the moment a huge payday at Marvel. So things completely outside of your control can take over and you can lose some of that story in an ending, which is why they're so hard. And it is so rare, even on a creator-owned book, where the team can say, we're going to get to this point, we're going to end it the exact way we want to do it. And that's something that Brian K. Vaughan, Cliff Chiang, Matt Wilson, Jared Fletcher, they got to do. Because that ending, like I said, when you say top 5 ending, I absolutely agree. Although I'd be hard pressed to think of 4 that are better than it right now.
Oh, that doesn't mean it's number 5. It's just like I'm going to leave myself margin in case I forgot about something. But and I would say top 5 ending, not just in comics but in fiction for me. In terms of just
it very well could be. In terms of everything you've read and experienced.
Yeah, I mean, if I was like the picture from It's Always Sunny with all those strings, the red, or like Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, it's just like there was no piece of yarn dangling. Like there was just no waste in the storytelling.
No, definitely.
And I can't think of many other books like that just have that perfect level of balance. They're still character driven. It's about the characters. Yeah. Yet the plot is so compelling. The mechanics are worthy of their own discussion, but they're overshadowed by the characters and the story. It's just everything I want.
And I think it's because maybe in terms of order of importance, it goes in that order: character, story, plot, and then actual mechanics of how the story works.
Right. That's always when I'm willing to forgive sloppy mechanics, is when you do that order. Yeah. And this didn't even require forgiveness for mechanics. No. Which is just a bonus for me. I can get past mechanics.
Yeah. If you could have the most clever story construction, and I can look at it and be like, wow, you put a lot of work into that. But yeah, if your characters are boring, if they're not compelling, if the overall story you're trying to tell is like whatever, then like, what's the point of being clever in your story? Like,
right.
What are you trying to prove?
I think
tell me a good story.
I think a good example.
I don't care how you do
of of getting the first two and not the third, probably. And I really don't want to get into this on the internet, but like Avengers Endgame, I feel like absolutely nailed the character stuff. Like they put like your phase 1 characters, this is their farewell. We're going to just crush it with there. The plot will be like good enough, like, you know, B plus maybe. And then the mechanics of like, is this really how it would work? Are there any plot holes we're leaving open here? It's like, whoops, C-.
The time heist really doesn't make any sense. I know the people out there who will defend it, but it's not.
It's not the point.
Yeah. Because the one thing the Marvel movies, and I think the reason they are so successful is because the vast majority of the time they get character right. They don't always get story right, and they definitely don't always get plot right.
They really don't get villains right.
Well, yeah, so they get protagonists right for the most part, and that's why they work, because in the end, it's fun to see Robert Downey Jr. be Tony Stark. It's fun to see Chris Hemsworth be Thor and Chris Evans be Captain America. You go for that, and then if the story is good, you can get through it. And if the specific plot points are like, if you put too much thought into it, doesn't quite work, you're okay with it. Versus, I think some of the earlier generation of superhero comic book movies didn't understand the characters, and that was the biggest problem.
Right.
So
and they got obsessed with the mechanics and like how to make the fights look cool and how to use CGI in embarrassing ways.
They didn't understand, the people making those movies didn't understand those characters, and so if you don't start with that, then I think you're just kind of guaranteed for failure. So yeah, when you had these character-driven stories, and it said that for Paper Girls to come down to that final pages when it's just like the most important thing apparently is just, hey, let's go for a bike ride a little longer.
I know. Everything in the universe changed. We're shook up. Yeah. And that's the resolution. Yeah, I just love it. It
is so beautiful.
We are like well over on time. I do want to do two things. I want to do our bookmark or whatever moment we want to savor from this last one. I think you could just say the last panel, and that'd be fine with me. So I did have that one as something notable, even though I know that was the very obvious one. But it's so last page, like you're not doing anything wrong.
The last page is so beautiful.
Okay,
that last page. Is so
and
beautiful.
Then, is there any point now in revising our list of rankings of the trades? I mean, we are a podcast committed to analyzing the trade paperbacks. To me, it would be 6 because it's just an absolute perfect. And like the storytelling of, doing the horizontal with all 4 girls' stories inching forward at the same time. It would be 6, 5, 2, 1. Oh no, 2, 1, 4, 3 probably. And there's no shade really thrown at any of them except 3. Yeah,
I think I would go.
And my biggest decision there was between 5 and 6 as the top one. I may have liked 5 more, but 6 gives you the most satisfying conclusion, and that's what's the hardest part to write.
What I will say though, I think
4 because I love it.
My favorite issue is 38. I'm sorry. Is 28.
Okay.
Which is the 4-panel for consecutive storytelling, because not only is it colored beautifully, because you see very distinct color palettes for each one of the stories, but the way it's written, the way it's
the
scripted,
words play off each other horizontally as well as vertically.
It's 4 separate conversations that all feel like the same conversation. So from a structure standpoint, that's my favorite issue. But I think my favorite trade, I think mine is 4, because I love being in 2000. I think I go 4, 6, 2, 5, 1, 3, maybe.
And 1, and I think 4 should be above 1 for me. So I think it'd be 6, 5, 2, 4, 1, 3.
I think I have 2 above 5 only because of the interactions between the 2 Errands, which
I love the 2 Errands.
Some of my favorite moments.
And 4 gives you the 2 tiffs, right?
The 2 tiff, yeah. But 6 is just so powerful, and 4 for me is just I think just the in terms of the nostalgic factor, it's just fun for me to be in that 2000 time period. I think it's
for sure. And like I love meeting Charlotte.
The most jokes.
Like getting the exposition from Charlotte, who was not an exhibition bot. Was such a breath of fresh air, and it was what spurred me on to keep reading the series. Because at that point, I was coming out of 3 being like, are they ever gonna like do anything with all this stuff they're throwing out there? And Charlotte was the answer, and it was great.
I think we talked about too the way that's handled, that because it's conversational, specifically to our young protagonists. They are a stand-in audience, and Aaron is asking the questions the audience would answer. So you're getting all this exposition, but because the way it's delivered,
she doesn't ask every question that the audience would ask.
Yeah, but the questions she's asking are ones the readers have.
And we learn things about her and our characters and what's important to them by what they ask. So you're still developing character, even when you're treading through plot and mechanics. Yeah. And it's just
a lesser writer handles that much worse. But so I think that's my ranking. 462-513. I think that's what I'm going with.
I know. So, I like how you end with the 513.
There we go.
That's our area code.
Awesome.
In Cincinnati.
Indeed it is. So I guess we want to end with our actual bookmark.
Yeah. Which I have a two-way tie, which I've already alluded to, but.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you go? Since we I think I stepped on one of yours earlier.
Okay. Well, so Easter egg. I do just love, the 1958 talk. I think he had so much fun writing the slang for the teenagers in 1958.
Oh yeah, for the 4 boys.
Yeah, when they were telling them to leave, and he says "goose it." I was like, he must have just chuckled to himself as he was writing that. Yeah. And then the penciler must have had a field day with that. Okay, so. Yeah. I do like the grandfather saying, the future is never fair, just inevitable. Yeah. He means it in a kind of a threatening, menacing way. I don't think it has to be interpreted that way.
No.
And I think the book proves that like it is inevitable and it's not necessarily fair. But it doesn't lead to kind of the nihilism that the grandfather thinks that it does.
It doesn't have to.
It does not necessarily lead there. But my other quote was my pen started junking out on me there, but it was the treatment of time is like a tape. Oh, the amount of time that we're given is irrelevant. It's what you do with it, which to me is very similar to like the end of Chamber of Secrets, where it says, it's not what you're born, it's what you become. It's about your choices. It's who you choose to be. It's just taking that and putting it on the axis of time rather than, birth and nobility and blood or whatever. So absolutely just solid Brian K. Vaughan gems. And it's like really potent stuff that's never preachy. It all bubbles up organically. So I can't pick between those two, but I just love them both. And none of them are from our 4 girls, which is crazy.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
And we have no narrator.
And Joppo.
So,
yeah.
Just impressive stuff.
No, I do. I mentioned that quote, the one that you talked about from Bronstein, and because it does remind me of that line from Sandman, which again is that Sandman page maybe is my favorite page in all of comics. But my bookmark here is another page. And it's from issue 28. I think it's page 8. It's when we see the tear in kind of space time there. And what I love about that is that it works both for the reader and also for like our characters. Like it breaks the panels and you see this rip and you see the mountain from 11,000 BCE. And the characters themselves are seeing that. That is what it's visual representation of what they're seeing, and yet it works for the audience of an actual rip and a break in the panels, because the whole issue is set up of these 4 horizontal panels. Each one telling their own story. And you see them all connected, but then when it breaks. And we see that, and that's actually also what the characters are seeing. So it's like it breaks the 4th wall without actually like breaking the 4th wall, like Deadpool style or She-Hulk style,
right?
Because it works for the reader of what we're seeing, but it's also that's what the characters are seeing. They're seeing that as well, and so that breaking of the panels is both artistic for the audience, the reader, but it's actually also what's happening in the story. And I love that representation. And I love that issue. I think because of the layout, it's my favorite issue, but that one page is, to me, is like, that's the strength of sequential art and graphic art storytelling, is that you can do those things. It can work on multiple levels. It can work for the reader and also represent what's happening in the story as well. And that's something you don't get in any other medium.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of those things that will be difficult to truly adapt for the, if you pardon my split infinitive, it will be difficult to adapt truly for the TV show. But I think
yes,
the TV show is a different medium and it should be treated as such, and they just come up with their own creativity rather than trying to do a cheap pawn off of what the comic was able to do.
What it should do, in my mind, if they were to ask me, is to take something like that and not try to replicate those things that only work on the page, and just try to find the heart of the same idea. How do you present this in live action? Don't try to do this on live action. How would you do the same thing?
Right.
How do you get the same feeling in live action?
Don't do the Ang Lee Hulk panel view for an entire movie.
Don't do the Zack Snyder Watchmen of like, well, if I just go panel to panel to panel to panel, that's a movie. That's not how it works. Find the heart of the story.
Storyboard. The comic is a medium.
Yes. So I'm hopeful for it, but that's one of those things that if they try to replicate exactly, like if you're watching on screen or television and like they do 4 boxes, like NFL Red Zone style, and then there's a break in time. Like if that's what it is,
Red
like
Zone style, now it's a little more endearing, but yeah.
Yeah, but like that's not going to work. Or like we're looking at 4 zoom windows. If it's that kind of 4 boxes in your television, simultaneous storytelling, and there's a rip through it. If that's how they present it, like I don't think that's going to work because it's way too literal. You got to find your own way to tell the same story, and I have faith right now that they're going to do that. Yeah. We shall see. We still don't have a premiere date as of this.
Got to be Halloween. Halloween 2022. I know they can do it. Why would you make a teaser for a show set on Halloween if you're not going to release it on Halloween? But
it really does feel that way. It really does feel that way. Again, also with Amazon already having a lit summer date for their other big show, Lord of the Rings. They're probably not going to want to double up. Yeah. So So look forward to that, but regardless of how the TV show ends up, if it's great, if it's terrible, it doesn't take away from the fact that we have what I think is a near perfect comic book run of issues and trade.
Yes, there's never been a bad show adaptation that has ruined the original material, and I love the insulation that comics have as a medium that way.
Yeah,
a bad Why the Last Man series did not take anything away from that book. Speaking of which, we will announce shortly. I think by the time you're listening to this, our next stuff will have easily been recorded. Will be available on our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You will hear this mid-August 2022. We are recording it early June, so we're hoping to stay ahead of you, keep fresh content out in front of you, and we will do a mailbag episode. So if you want to discuss this, come to the Facebook group, come to the website, holler at us on Instagram or Twitter. Tell us all of the things we did wrong. We love it, and we will do better if we did something wrong. Not factoring for you just being an idiot.
No, I actually, my plan is to simply deny to say whatever it is you said wrong because it was so long ago. By the time you're hearing this, I'm just going to act like I never said it and it's completely forgot
we'll just retcon our own podcast. There's nothing more comic canon than retconning.
We're just going to go back over the tape and rewrite it a little bit.
That would be an insane move, and I love it. We just keep re-recording these episodes until we clean up every error, and we both prove the point of the story while perfecting ourselves. That might actually happen.
That's called meta content right there. That's called full on meta content right there.
If not, I could at least do like an Apocalypse Now, where we have like a director's cut and then a Redux edition.
Oh yeah,
and we just keep tinkering with it and releasing this. We'll only have 6 episodes, but we'll have 5 versions of each one.
It'll be the special edition, and then
And the limited edition.
The limited edition. Yeah, the extended version,
the George Lucasified version, where you go change things for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, let's not go to that territory right now.
Yeah, no, we don't have time for that. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for reading. I hope at least if you only moderately enjoyed the podcast, I hope you really enjoyed the book. Because I think what we are here to do is not point a spotlight on ourselves, but point to really great works of art and shine the light on them and the creators and say, look how awesome this was. Enjoy it alongside of us. I don't think either of us aspires to be any kind of internet celebrity or anything like that. In fact, I think you will probably never see our pictures on the website or Instagram or anywhere if we have our say. So it's all about the content.
Absolutely, absolutely. We want people to read comics any way they can, enjoy them however you can get them, and to really celebrate the medium. And, it's something that Mike and I both love, and we hope you guys do too.
And with that, I have nothing to add. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you for the next trade paperback we go through.
Peace.